Good evening, good greetings, good day. It is so wonderful to be with you again, and we appreciate you being with us tonight on our third Triumphant Thursday broadcast. Our purpose is to bring to consciousness various subjects that impact and intersect with global peoples. Our goal is that you will be empowered to answer the call to action, thereby having an opportunity to experience your own triumphant Thursdays. Our subject tonight is the history of pride. We have as our guest the Reverend, soon to be the Reverend Dr. Monica Joy Cross. She will introduce to you where she is a pastor, but I will say while she is, before she does that, that she is my only trans daughter, and I am so proud, very, very proud of her. And my other guest is Deacon Michelle Fox Phillips. She is a deacon at the not Michigan, Metropolitan Community Church, Detroit. And her pastor is the Reverend Dr. Roland Stringfellow. And let me just back up and say that our pastor, my daughter and I, our pastor is the Honorable Reverend Dr. Bishop Yvette Flunder. And we are so happy to have these two guests to come forward at this time. And so,
hey, Mom.
Hey, Pastor Monica, my daughter. Tell us where you're pastoring, please.
Yeah, so I am pastoring at First Christian Church of Oakland, a Disciples of Christ church. I also minister at Tapestry Ministries in Berkeley, California. I've been at these two churches for about, God, time is going by fast, maybe 5 or 6 years.
It's been that long, huh?
Yeah, it's just going by fast.
Which one of those churches is affiliated with the late Howard Thurman?
Well, so the church I did my internship, Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples. I did my internship at his church with Dorsey Blake. Yeah, but
Very
these two
good.
churches, although they utilize Howard Thurman's work, they're not affiliated with that church.
Very good. And Deacon, you looking mighty pretty tonight, Miss
Thank
Deacon.
you. Thank you.
If you don't mind me sharing with the community that you very recently had to let go of your wife who left her earth suit. And so we are still remembering you in prayer. Want you to know that.
Thank you. Thank
And so happy that you are continuing on your journey to grieve. And I thank you when you mention her on Facebook and you talk about your joys during your time together. It really is quite encouraging and quite refreshing. So tell us a little bit about how you became deacon at Metropolitan Community Church, Detroit.
Okay, well, I started going to Metropolitan Community Church of Detroit back probably about 10 years ago. No, 20 years ago. Back around 2000 when I first met Pastor Mark Bidwell. And we met through our first Transgender Day of Remembrance. And my wife and I, late wife, Jamie, eventually drifted towards becoming members of the church. And I was married at the church with a rabbi, by the way, because I'm Messianic.
Oh.
So we had a Jewish Christian wedding with a chuppah and everything. And I continued on after Jamie passed. And then about 6 years ago, Reverend Dr. Roland Stringfellow activated the diaconate at Metropolitan Community Church of Detroit. And I put in an application, went through the interview, and about 6 years ago, I was consecrated as a deacon at MCCD.
Outstanding. And for our reviewers, let me share that a diaconate is similar to a deacon board. The difference is that when we use the word diaconate, it usually means both men and women. And a lot of churches still use the word deacon, and the women call themselves deacon. And, I guess whatever floats your boat, huh? So I'm gonna continue with you, Deacon. Like for you to share how you met your wife. Uh, how you were you trans at the time that you met your wife?
Yes. By the way, I started the first transgender rap support group at Affirmations, the LGBT
Yes.
community center in Detroit back in 98. So in December, we had our very first monthly meeting, and Jamie and a friend of hers, Jana, came to the meeting. And that's how I met Jamie. And our relationship started out as being a friend, and it just gradually went from there. And then in September of 03, 9703, by the way, we were married by Reverend Bidwell and Rabbi Tamira Colton.
And how many years were you able to stay together before she went to worlds unknown?
Well, she went to see Jesus. Let's say about 5 years we knew each other.
Oh, okay, a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, we met in December of 98, and she passed on June 8th of 06.
Of 06.
Mhm.
So
that's
Deacon, so it's been quite a journey for you, starting Affirmations and losing a spouse. And how has that changed your relationship with God?
Made it stronger,
Made it stronger?
especially after like last year in May, I lost my fiance, Chrissy. Okay.
Oh,
And it's made me stronger.
okay.
It made my spiritualism deeper.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very, very good. So how have you, well, Bishop has taught us that, you go with people that are going with you. You don't waste your time trying to convince people that you are righteous and trying to convince people that God loves you, because God loves everybody and I am a body. And, we don't waste our time doing that. But I am curious to know how you have been challenged as a transgender woman, particularly after your gender reassignment, if at all.
Challenge. Yeah. Well, I started the Gender Identity Network Alliance, GNA, back in 05. And that's to challenge the stereotypes and to advocate for the transgender, gender nonconforming community. So, yes, I'm still trying to convince people.
Really?
Yes,
And what is your strategy?
just to talk to them,
Okay.
just to
Conversation.
educate them
Okay.
about our community. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the only way. You can't go yelling and screaming and everything else, because then it doesn't happen.
Right. And so therefore you have a quite an intimate story, so to speak, that you can relate to the whole celebration of Pride.
Yes.
And this is Pride's month. And so I'm going to continue with you, asking you to give your understanding of the history of Pride.
Oh, my. To me, the history of Pride started with Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, two trans women of color at Stonewall.
Yeah.
They were the ones that started the riot, or now they're calling it rebellion, whatever that might be. Unfortunately, as years passed, the following year is when they started gay pride. And gay men back then, and I'll call it like it is, gay white men, when Marcia and Sylvia showed up to march with them, were told not to be there. Okay.
Now,
And
you're not telling me that white gay men at that time were prejudiced. No way.
oh, yeah. No, I'm not. I'm going to say an organization has that, how can I say, reputation. Okay.
Have things improved? Have relationships become integrated? Have white gay men been more receptive of people of
Most
color?
people, yes, most people have. Okay, most gay white, but there's still a faction of the gay white community, especially gay lesbian women, TERFs. You know, these are TERFs are white and they're lesbian. They could be, no, they're white. Most of them are white. I'm not going to broad brush them. Let me take that back. Are cisgendered women who look at trans women as being intrusive and that we are not real people.
I see.
You know, and the biggest one that's making a lot of noise now is J.K. Rowling's.
Say a little bit more about J.K. Rowling's. I'm
She is
unfamiliar with that name.
She's the one in the what's the name of the series? The movies
Harry
and the
Potter.
books?
Yeah, Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
Oh, yes. Now I
The
know of
author
whom
of
you
Harry
speak.
Potter.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Monica. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Yes, I saw that. I read that the other day, and I think that the literary agent is losing some clients because of her position.
Clients and some of the employees of the publishing company are not going to work there for her anymore.
My.
They're
Protest.
They don't want to
Protest.
publish. The
Right.
employees do not want to publish any of her works.
Well, in the words of Bishop Flunder, radical inclusivity is the only way to go.
Absolutely. I'm a big supporter of that. Big supporter.
And so now we might be going back and forward a little bit because I do want to talk about Saturday night. I registered for that earlier today, or maybe I registered last night yesterday after we completed our trial that we do just before we come on the show. But Pastor Monica, my daughter, if you don't mind, let me share with the community before you start talking how we kind of met. We were at a Fellowship of Affirming Ministries gathering. And at that time, you showed up as Alex, and we are fellow veterans. I think you're a retired senior chief. Is that correct?
Retired chief.
Retired chief. And so I had no reason to think of you otherwise than as Alex. And then on the very last day of the conference, you showed up as Monica, and I took a double look. I could barely believe my eyes, but I am so proud. And one of the questions that I have for you, daughter, is how did you balance being a chief by day and a trans by night? How did that work for you?
A whole lot of prayer.
A whole lot of prayer.
Yeah, well, you know what I did? So part of my path is because of a relationship with God like we all have. The Spirit said, do what I've called you to do, and I'll take care of the rest.
Very good.
I really have to trust those words. And every time I get in a situation that says, trust me, just trust me. I know what we're doing. And so I wound up moving across the water from Norfolk, Virginia. So Hampton, Virginia is like across the water, like Oakland, San Francisco is across the water. So I would be Alex over there in Norfolk, and in Hampton and stuff, I'd be Monica. I went
Very
to New
good.
Life in I went to New Life MCC at the time, which was in Norfolk, a few minutes from Pat Robertson's place too. So
Well, did you
I
ever
just
go
followed
into
the
his
Spirit.
church?
No,
Did
but I did go to the school for a little bit.
did
Oh,
Yeah, sure did. Yeah, sure
you know
did.
Pat Robinson is our best friend? You know that, right? He's on
Well,
our
he had a
side.
change. Yeah, he had a change of heart after a doctor spoke to him. But
Yes, indeed. My goodness, my goodness. Well, when you said we, when you said you heard God say, we will work it out, was your response, who is we? Or did you just decide to settle into trusting God?
it took a minute because at the time I had a family. You know, I'm a black man with 2 kids and a wife in the military, and I was on track to be a minister in the Amy Zion Church. I
Oh my
thought,
goodness.
yeah. So of course, the more I started getting into ministry, the more God's truth came out, and all those memories I have from being a little kid, which I didn't take seriously, they started coming back up again
Mm-hmm.
because the truth of who I am started coming up. So fitting into what society said you're supposed to do is what I did, right?
Right.
At some point, the authenticity of who I am came out. I said, no, no, we need to do this. And
Yes.
it's not it's like not a matter of, while you do have agency, a lot of times, sometimes, like not really, in certain circumstances, life says this is what needs to happen. It was
Okay.
rough for me, yeah, but I eventually learned to listen to the Spirit and where the Spirit was leading.
And what do you mean by having agency?
Well, I can make choices, uh,
Okay.
and at one point, I can make a choice to try to deny being trans. I really
Okay.
did.
Okay.
Uh,
I believe you.
bad idea, terrible idea. Don't do it.
Don't.
You know, no.
So, as Pastor Sue could tell us, anytime you are told to go one way by the Spirit and you go another way, uh, God has a very
Yeah.
interesting show for you. Let's put it that way, because
Yeah.
it can be it's painful, but
Yeah.
it's also somewhat entertaining. I mean, as painful as some of our shared experiences
Hmm.
have been, we would not be where we are now without that pain and using that pain as fuel to live into the soul that God has created us to live into.
Exactly.
Yes.
Particularly, so I'm the director of women's ministries for the Northern California, Nevada region of the Disciples of Christ. And so, in that position, I have a lot of cisgender women who are like, "Now, we're not fitting a black trans woman." Like, or what? You know. Uh, and so, uh, having to really teach or educate and then provide reading materials so that the women can actually learn about transgender, just transgender. We're not talking about
Yes.
anything. Uh, Having dealt with the pain, uh, it helps me to do that. Yeah,
So, are you one of the are you on staff with the regional church?
yeah, I'm on staff. I work with
Okay.
Tanya Bynum,
Of
regional minister.
course.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, that's interesting that you are that you are really the pioneer, as far as I know. I don't know of any other African American trans woman uh, poster child in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Is that both a burden and a blessing?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Well, you know, I mean, I've I've learned over the years, and that's what I'm called to do. You know, I mean, I'm called to be a teacher, to educate, to move people to different consciousness. And I really think all trans women, and particularly transgender women, are called to do that. To be teachers, to be cultural teachers, to help people be liberated. How to say free people? Free people?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Absolutely. Um, Deacon, when 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 uh, when Pastor Monica was talking about agency, what came to your mind? Uh, and let me put the question differently. Have you known all of your life that you were trans?
Yes, pretty much most of it.
Okay.
Okay. As a young child, I knew something prior to puberty. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what.
Okay.
Okay. And then when I reached puberty, I started cross dressing, and then I started to identify as being a young girl back then.
Mhm.
And what was the family and community response to that?
I was in the closet.
I see.
Okay. I was totally in the closet. My mom caught me once cross dressing. Okay. Because basically I did it in my room. I wouldn't leave my room, but she came in my room unexpectedly one day. Okay.
How did that
But
go?
boys don't do that.
Okay.
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 That's the extent of it, And it wasn't until after I was married and had some kids, two boys, that I really started to come into myself
Hmm.
as Michelle. My wife and I separated, and I started my transition at middle age. I was 40 at the time,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I started my transition.
And how have your children responded to you as a full trans?
Very supportive.
Very
Very.
good.
My two boys, my 5 grandchildren are very supportive.
My
Also,
goodness. I'm
okay.
happy for you because it doesn't work that way for most of us.
No, it doesn't. I've known very family, and a good friend of mine whose children has shunned her, which is a sad situation.
Mhm.
But we have to do what God has called us to do. And while I'm thinking about this, I have canceled our annual 11:11 transgender service of remembrance at the Robin Theater where you have been, and I am very seriously praying about having a live annual 11:11 transgender service of remembrance online, and I certainly appreciate your attendance when you have come to Detroit and you've to Lansing, and you've brought Pastor Stringfellow with you, and our first speaker, Sister Jerry, has been coming, and so this year we're going to have it online, and you will be invited, and
You.
Pastor Monica will be invited, and I'm going to ask in advance, Pastor Monica, that you bring the word that day. And you will be the first. No, Jerry's a veteran, isn't she?
Jerry, yes.
Yes,
Yes, she
and
is.
Shar is a veteran. Shar was, I think, our
Yes.
first speaker. But I'm going to ask my daughter to be our speaker this year, and it's usually the Sunday afternoon closest to Veterans Day. The Sunday afternoon closest to Veterans Day.
It's on the
So
calendar.
It's on your calendar. Amen. So back to, and of course, Deacon, we would love your input. But the African American community, I think, has gotten the heavier heat or the
Very.
hotter heat when it comes to a theological perspective
Oh yeah.
on what it means to be transgender,
Mhm.
and might even, because I've got a pretty good idea of what of the way I have asked you, Pastor Monica, to approach this. And I want to
Mhm.
also remind those who are listening and those who are watching that we welcome your live comments and your live questions. We will not be we will not be uh, as as strong as we could be, as powerful as we could be, as engaged as we want to be, without your comments and without your questions. So. Your understanding, and you have taught me also to understand the relationship between being a trans person and being a eunuch in the
Mhm.
Bible. Could you
Yes.
share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, when I was heard the voice of the Spirit saying, "Just follow me and be obedient to me, and just trust me," I was clear that I was already a black man in a very, very unjust world, and you want me to come out as trans? You gotta be crazy. I mean, I'm going down a notch in that, in that context. So,
Yeah.
I really had to grapple with the theology. How do I figure this out? Because I've been taught certain ways, indoctrinated a certain way that life looks a certain way, and if you come out as anything other than heteronormative, being straight, cisgendered, then you're just an abomination. Uh, but it did kind of help being black because I'm already in bad shape anyway. So anyway,
Why
anyway,
not?
why
Yeah.
not, right? And so I really started reading the scriptures for myself. I knew I couldn't get any help at Amy Zion Church. That was out. I had to read the scriptures for myself. And I went through Isaiah, looking at Isaiah. But also, I really looked at the eunuch in Acts who read the scriptures and asked to be taught, like, okay, so what is this about? And when the eunuch received the hospitality of God, it was a whole new place, a whole new world.
Yeah.
Because once you receive the hospitality of God, there's nothing that can stop you. Um,
So why is it that you think, and yes, I think that that is an important point to make, that once you receive, and the key word is receive, once you receive the hospitality of God, then there's no stopping. There's no turning around. It's just onward and upward.
mhm.
So how do you reconcile, um and let me just pause here parenthetically to say that homosexuality in the Bible means does is not talking well, you tell us what it's talking about.
Um, well,
The
homosexuality
gods?
is different. It's
Okay.
so the homosexuality in the Bible is not always about sex per se. It's like when you look at erotica in the Bible, erotic like between David and Jonathan. That was a
Yes.
very erotic situation. But we're talking about how society has shifted eroticism
Hmm.
to one-dimensional. Oh, it's all about sex. No, no, no. It's about relationship, a deep communion. And
Yes.
so, whether you're talking about Ruth uh, and Naomi, or whether you're talking about David and Jonathan, those relationships are very close and intimate. But of
Mm-hmm.
course, in order for the oppressor to ensure that we stay oppressed, they had to shift the meanings of these words.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because each civilization has its own language. And
Yes.
right now, right now that's a real problem because things are shifting, which is why we are where we are now, because things are shifting as God would have it. Uh, but if you once you remove it from the sexual only vibe and move same gender love to much more about a deep spiritual relationship, with implications to the sexual encounter. It's not the sex first. No, it's the relationship first.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah. But in our society, we're taught that sex first.
Yes.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that's European is European ancestry is sex,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that's
You know.
you know the Bible, to me, the Bible doesn't teach anything about homosexuality at all. It's mislabeling
Hmm.
by certain evangelicals. I'm not going to broad brush the evangelical movement because not all of them are that way. But
Mhm.
the religious right, okay, focus on the family and Million Moms, those organizations, they're the ones that are taking the love that people have for each other
Yeah.
and demonizing it. Okay,
Exactly.
they don't look at the deeper love that two people have for each other.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what God has intended, is that deep love.
hmm
And
Exactly.
that's it. That's what's driving it. And it's the same thing with the transgender community. You brought up eunuchs. Eunuchs are in the Bible. They're
Yes.
transgender.
Okay.
Okay. But they don't
Mhm.
look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very,
You
very
know,
interesting. You've got some news to share with us, Deacon. What happened the other day? Because when I called you, you were swinging from the chandeliers, and you said you haven't heard. I hadn't heard. Tell us, Deacon, what you had heard about the highest court in the nation.
oh my God. Um,
Hallelujah. Oh,
three court cases were rolled up into one, two
Okay.
involving gay men,
Uh huh.
and the third one is a trans woman, Amy Australia Stevens
mhm.
from Redford, Detroit area. She was fired for being transgender. And I'm going to call out the funeral home because I don't want people to use them. Okay.
Okay.
G and R and G Harris Funeral Home
Okay.
were the ones that fired her, and they were the ones that were sued in the case, and they lost. And
Very
this
good.
has a lot of ramifications, not just for this was based on employment only, but
Mhm.
they're saying that the 1964 law includes sexual orientation and gender identity.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's going to redefine what a certain person in the White House is trying to erase our community, the
Mhm.
transgender community.
Not
It's
just the
going to,
transgender, but you're right.
they just came out with a new rule with discrimination against transgender health, that people can
Mhm.
discriminate transgender health based
Right.
on sex. And their definition of sex is how you were born,
Yes.
Mhm. That's
not
right.
on how you identify. This is going to probably turn that upside down.
Hmm.
Right.
And same thing with, they're supposed to come out with a new rule for homeless shelters that they have to um,
Oh,
that they
Tyler.
can discriminate and have someone like myself who is no op, or well, I'm post op, but there are
Mhm.
trans women and men who cannot have surgery for various reasons. So if they're homeless, they would be put into, if their biological sex are born, male, they would go in with the men,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa for females who identify as men, they would go into the females.
Right.
And that is a recipe for violence.
There it
Yes,
is.
in either direction.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, and the aforementioned was Title VII Civil Rights Act of '64.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Outstanding.
it's upended. So it's going to have a lot of ramifications. And
Yes.
right
Yes.
now, there's 4 lawsuits that are going through the courts on 14th Amendment of fair and equal treatment in regards to the trans military ban.
Outstanding. I am so happy to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
And I support it. And I hope something that I did while I was on active duty has brought the military to this point. I served, well, this program is not about what I did in the military, but about how uh, you are responding to the history of pride out of which you both um, uh, were birthed. And, you know, I really don't, let's see, how can I say this? I'm getting a message that the aforementioned was the Title VII Civil Rights Act.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that means that what happened the other day was birthed out of Title VII Civil Rights
Yes.
Act. Yes?
Right.
Okay.
That'll probably be including Title IX, which is for schools.
hmm
Yeah.
Okay.
You were speaking of, perhaps both of you were speaking of European theology. And I will take this moment to step out on faith and say, uh, every religion in America has been birthed out of European theology. So it's which I call which I call plantation theology.
Oh yeah.
Because there are a handful. You've got the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, to my knowledge, and the Metropolitan Community Church are the only two movements that are theologically based that support the whole person, and has taken. I don't know which one of you would want to address this, but I want to go back to the receiving the hospitality of God. And oh my God, it's unbelievable. We only have 17 minutes left. Time
Really?
is fleeting. Yes, it is 12
Yes.
minutes after 9. and I want to go back to receiving the hospitality of God, because I have heard it said that that was the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, that it was not about same gender loving people.
No, it
It is
wasn't.
not about the men that surrounded the house. And I don't know what that dad was thinking about giving up his daughters. I mean, that still kind of blows my mind. But s- s- so, and that's where I think we get the first one of the first references in Holy Writ to the word abomination.
Right.
I think it's stated someplace else, but after it's stated in that particular story, we just hear it over and over and over again in contemporary life. How do we help people to shift that way of thinking? As Bishop taught us, you got to unlearn some things to
Right.
learn some things correctly.
Yes.
So
So,
I would. Oh,
yes, please, daughter.
so I'm gonna share a story that happened to me one Sunday. So I'm pastoring two churches and I'm doing all this work. So Sundays are a full day for me. So I'm really tired at the end of the day.
Yes.
So I went into a store in my local neighborhood to get something to drink, iced tea or something. And this guy just looked at me like, had his look on his face. I knew what he was thinking already, right? He said, what's the matter? I said, I'm just tired. I have two churches. And the look on his face was like, what? How does that work? They all say, how does that work? And I just told him I'm a pastor and I pastor a church. Like, where at? The idea of being authentic,
Yes.
uh, and being able to push back on the narrative. So uh, when I say the Black trans woman that, yeah, I'm a pastor, I've gone to school, I've done all these works. Not saying you gotta go to school all the time, but that's how you
It
push,
helps.
because then the person has to think like, okay, wait a minute. What I've been taught is this, but I see this. I've had these conversations. Um, but it is about being authentic. You can't
Absolutely.
do it any other way. In fact, my primary uh, uh, reality of the trans person is to be authentic.
Okay.
Uh, the bodily stuff, the mental stuff, okay, that'll come. But the key is to be authentic, which goes back to have I received the hospitality of God. Uh,
That is an awesome thing. Have I received the hospitality of God?
yeah.
Yes.
And it
I love
doesn't
that.
deny, yeah, and it doesn't deny the complications in the murder of my Black trans sisters. Uh, but that just means I have to be even more authentic, because so that they wouldn't have died in vain. I got to be even more authentic who I am, so that hopefully down line, you won't have this happen to transgender women. But
That
of
was
course,
one of
so
Exactly. Trans women of color are the most marginalized uh, part of our communities. Okay. They're the ones that are being murdered. Like 98% of the murders here in this country last year were trans women of color. I think there was one or two. I think there was a trans man, and I think there was a white person that was killed last year. And it's the same thing this year. There was something on Facebook the other day. Was it Facebook or an online news source where this woman was being beat up by a group of men, and she ran behind uh, the counter at a convenience store, and the convenience store didn't do anything to protect her. They didn't call the police or anything. They were just went behind the counter, brought her out. Thankfully, she survived and she was able to leave.
mhm.
You know,
well, I have disappeared, and I don't know how to get back to you.
You disappeared?
I mean, I can't see anybody, and but I can hear you. And this happened
is
once
your
before.
camera on? Well, your
It
camera's got to be on.
Everything is on. I just hit the wrong button. I was going back to the comments and hit the wrong button, and I'm not certain of how to get back. But keep on talking. I'll be there. I'll be there, and there I am. Okay.
Okay.
I'm glad you couldn't. I'm glad you couldn't tell that I was gone for a minute. Uh, so I think we have sufficiently talked about the the deaths of our trans women of color and the deaths of our trans community at large. And I still want to go back to Sodom and Gomorrah in a minute, but I want to also say that the focus of Space for Grace Without Walls, United Church of Christ, are the veterans. And it is the hardest thing to identify transgender uh, women and men who have served in the armed forces. And needless to say, our veterans are in the higher category of people who are committing suicide daily.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any suggestions as to how we can be the catalyst for inviting transgender veterans to join us. And in the 3 years that we've been, since 2017, that we've been having the 1111 annual transgender service of transgender veterans, we have been able to attract no more than 4 trans veterans. So, any comment on that, Pastor Deacon Michelle?
Well, not being a veteran, so I really can't speak much to it. I know a lot of trans individuals, veterans or not, that once they transition, they leave that part of their life. In other words, they no longer identify as being transgender, but they identify the gender that they have chosen or what they believe. So that could be a reason too.
So say a little bit more about that.
A lot of,
What do you mean by identify as who they are? What is that? What are you saying?
They identify as being a man or a woman.
I see.
Okay. They're trans, but they don't identify as being transgender.
I see. Okay.
So once they have their transition, whatever that might be in their life, because a lot of people can't have surgery. So once they come to that end, they don't identify as being transgender.
I understand.
So to bring someone that doesn't identify as being transgender, vet or no vet, you're not going to do it.
Understood. Well, did I ask all of the questions that I asked in the pre-conference? Or do you have questions that you would like to ask of each other? Since one is trans black and one is trans white. How about that?
I love it.
Me too.
I love meeting you, Monica.
I love meeting you too, Michelle. As I listened to your life story, it's like it's real similar to mine.
Yes.
There's similarities.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, similarities. Yeah, that was cool.
Have your children come around, daughter?
Yes. In fact, I was a lot of prayer about it, and I prayed about it over the years, but I learned to keep my hands off and let God do the work. And one day my daughter calls me up and says, "Hey, I want to come out and spend some time," and da 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 da. So she actually came out to California from Little Rock, Arkansas, by the way.
My goodness.
Yeah.
God bless her.
And we spent time together. She came to our annual gathering for the church for the region, and she got to meet everybody, all my support system. She got to meet everybody.
Outstanding.
And I said, "You never said you had a daughter." Well, you never asked. So, and then my sons come around. So, they're very supportive. Always on the phone, texting. And my daughter she is a musician. She writes music. And they're like, "What? Where'd you get that from?" "Well, I got it from you." So anyway, so it's been a long time coming, but it's really nice.
Outstanding.
Really nice. In fact, keep my daughter in prayer. Her name is Casey. She's out there protesting right now in Little Rock.
Good for her.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Good for her.
CASEY?
KACY.
KACY.
With a K.
All right. Well, we certainly will be praying for her and praying for her safety in particular. Yeah. And this younger generation, they're not taking the crap we did.
No.
That our generation took.
I know.
But and I view it as the world falling in place, not falling apart, but falling in place. And my question is, when is the church going to catch up? Because we just say
I don't know about that. Like there's a thing that's making the rounds in the news media here in Detroit of a lesbian couple, Terry and Kirsty. Terry was a music director for 30 years at a Catholic church. And the archdiocese found out about, they were open, but now the archdiocese is putting their foot down and fired Terry for being married to Kirsty. And it's making the news, and it's in the papers. WXYZ did a story on them today.
Good.
And at one time they were members of MCCD. Okay. So, the church has got to learn. And
the church is going to have to learn.
Absolutely. And what I see is going on today is what happened 50 years ago in the 60s. Same thing.
Yep.
Doesn't seem to be having a similar impact, though, in the church. You were getting ready to say?
Yeah, so my favorite books are the Minor Prophets, Amos and Micah. So God has a plan. So we're at that, I think, so theologically, I think we're at a point. Some people call it an inflection point, but we're getting into a new horizon of what can mean. Usually the youth have to carry that horizon into place. So I think, because although it looks pretty intense right now, there's a spirit moving. So when I see the protests, when I see the tearing down statues, there is this spirit going on that is moving it forward. It's so, I mean, the uglier it gets with the administration's policies, the more hope there actually is. But it's so, yeah, because you know how it is when you throw a Hail Mary pass, you know you're gonna lose the game. You throw a Hail Mary pass, because it's over. But
yes. Yes. Well, we have a quote in one of our chats: until the church gets it, we must keep on being the church.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Amen.
Sister Michelle, Deacon, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say more and more churches are coming around to accepting us and affirming us.
Yes.
And United Methodist looks like they're going to split. Their church is split.
Yes. Absolutely. And someday we will all be one again, because it really is about being one with God.
Absolutely.
And because there's only one God, known by many millions of names, in as it has been sung by Mahalia Jackson and others. And ladies, we're done. We have 3 more minutes left, and we may find the opportunity to revisit this conversation, and perhaps we should count on having this conversation with our audience in the closest Sunday to November 11th for our annual 11/11 transgender service of remembrance. So within the next 2 minutes, I want to again thank Reverend Monica Joy Cross and Deacon Michelle Fox Phillips for being our guest tonight. We certainly want to thank our awesome administrator, Pastor Sue, who is a member of Living Waters or Living Rivers, or just help me, Pastor Sue. They have 2 churches, one in New York and one in New Jersey, and her pastor is the Bishop-elect, Reverend Dr. Vanessa Brown. And so we want to give a shout out to her congregation. It's Rivers of Living Waters Ministries. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Sue. And we want to give a shout out to our incredible bishop, the Reverend Dr. Bishop Yvette A. Flunder, who is the founder and prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. And we also want to give a shout out to a request that you join the local NAACP chapter in your area. And I am a member of the Lansing NAACP chapter and invite you to join your area chapter. And if you would like to be on our show, or if you would like to have a conversation on our show, the information is there to be our guest on our show. Please email me at drpjanderson@spaceforgrace.org. And to financially support Triumphant Thursdays, please go to Dr. PJ Anderson at space to the PayPal to Dr. PJ Anderson at spaceforgrace.org. And we're going to end with a quote that is currently in currently serves as a logo at Space for Grace Without Walls United Church of Christ as soon as Pastor Sue puts it up. And while she is putting that up, let me leave you with this word, that whatever is good and whatever is true, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good report, speak on, think on these things. And I say that because Proverbs cautions us that as a person thinks, what goes on up here eventually comes out of here, and then we act upon. But at first, it's a thought. So whatever a person thinks of, that's what that person becomes. Now remember that. You get what you say, you get what you think, because we serve an incredible universe that hears us, whether for good or for ill, and sees to it that we get our wish. Am I telling the truth?
Tell
Yes.
the truth on that. Yes, you
God
are.
bless you. God love you. And thank you for being with us. We'll see you, Lord willing, next Thursday. There it is. If you ask me how long I'll be your friend, my answer will be I don't know, because I really don't know which one is longer, forever or always. We'll see you next Thursday when we will be revisiting the power of the black dollar. And that okay. So what y'all